What's up, duelists? It's your motherfucking boys. Today we've got a very special guest, Flamvel duelist, Soulsmanic. What's up, Soulsmanic?
Hello, hello.
Soulsmanic, you recently top 32'd the North American Remote Duel YCS, of which there was approximately, what did you say, 640 players, something like that?
Yeah, something around there.
Very impressive showing. Very impressive showing. James and I are going to be doing a little bit of a top 32 interview. We're going to talk about what it takes to do well in a remote duel, besides marking your sleeves, besides the obvious of playing a bunch of one-of cards and stacking them. What made you decide to enter this YCS, Soulsmanic?
Well, I was just, it's been very boring with COVID, so I just needed something to actually look forward to and to practice towards. And so I didn't enter the first remote YCS because I wasn't a big fan of the remote duels, but I like this meta and I spent more time practicing with it. And so I wanted to try and actually do well in that one. And it turned out well.
Yeah. What
Hold up,
about?
you're saying the Edison format ladder is not scratching that itch for you?
I mean, I top 10 did it and I stopped grinding after that.
Oh, dude, you're
Uh,
not shit till you break the top three. You gotta load up those fire 200s.
Honestly, low key, Soulsmanic, you broke the top 10, but then I pushed you out. So I mean, like, what?
Oh,
We're,
oh,
Maybe a
friendly
little
we're
competition.
back.
little
We're back
grudge
with the
rush.
value. We're still there. We're still there.
Oh, you're
Nice,
still
good
there? You're
choice.
still there?
Excellent
Okay,
choice.
solid. This deck, not like Vayu that much, but kind of. I mean, you've got the Celestial. Celestial's kind of like a
In
Vayu.
what ways is it similar to Bayou?
Uh,
Let's start there.
Trick Clown's kind of like a wolf, I guess. I don't know. Why did you play this deck? Give me the insight.
What's up with this deck?
Yeah, so I mean, Invoke Dogma Destiny is like one of the best decks of the format, but like this is clearly a bit different than that because there's random cards like Trickstars and the Performage clown in it. So before the event, I was testing largely Sky Striker Destiny, and I was having a bit of success with it, but I felt that there was just it didn't have a good enough theme. Whereas like sometimes I would want to go, I draw hands and I say I want to go second with them when I'm going first, or vice versa. I also found that I didn't have as good a job as outing Enforcer as I would like. And then so I realized I wanted to play some Invoke deck because I think that deck deals with Enforcer the best. I mean, Invocation into either Mechaba or just banishing it deals with it very well. But I didn't like the Dogma engine at all because I felt that, well, for a few reasons. One is that you're playing a second engine that loses to the exact same side cards as the first engine. So game two, they're siding in Droll and Lancia, and second engine of Dogma loses to the exact same thing. So if you're getting hit by any one of those cards, you get punished even harder. And the other reason is that I felt that I didn't want to play many hand traps, which that deck does, because I don't think that they're that efficient in this format. I think that Valor and Perm are very good in some cases, but the Dragon Circle version of Sword Soul is picking up, and I didn't want to play into that. Also, if you ever run into some back row deck, then you just get punished because those cards are dead. And they also conflict with the Destiny package a lot because when you're going to your turn two, if you draw a hand trap off Celestial or draw it for turn, then it's not contributing anything to the game that turn when your main goal should be pushing.
Mhm.
I wanted to take a different approach to this deck. I knew I wanted to play Invoke Destiny, and I realized I should just play rather than with all of these hand traps and with kind of the standard Dogma engine. I just want to play cards that let me see both engines more often. I think that was one of the other issues with Dogma Invoked is that you sometimes just have one engine and it's not good enough. And so rather than try to high roll with three engines, I just made this deck a bit more consistent in opening both engines because you have cards like Foolish and Set Rotation that now are extra ways to Alistar, but also extenders. There's no real deck that's unbreakable. And if you look at this, most of the go second cards are fine setting going first. So if I choose to go first with this deck. If I go first, I can set Chalice, I can set Imperm, I can set Super Poly, and they all still function going second. So I felt that the die roll wasn't as important. I felt that it just functioned better than hand traps, and I mean, it worked out well in the end. But that was kind of my mentality, where it's just I didn't feel the Dogma cards contributed enough, and I wanted to just try and take a different direction.
I like that. I like that. I like using these quick play negates, I suppose, is how you would describe them, as opposed to using something like Dark Ruler No More, which really is only good going second, or using something like, I don't know, Effect Veiler, Nibiru even, which are only good going on whatever turn or in certain phases or whatever. These are the most versatile, right? Chalice Droplet, Super Polymerization even. These are great cards. Even Impermanence, to a degree, is totally fine going first because you can just set it behind your Enforcer, and that's a strong setup. You did mention that the deck struggles, well, not the deck, but the invoked engine struggles a little bit with Droll and Lockbird, and I've noticed you didn't choose to include Called by the Grave in your deck. Is there a reason for not playing that card specifically?
So I think Call By, I'm a very big fan of that card, but I think that the biggest strength of that card is the fact that it is, in worst case, in best case, or in the general way you look at it, is you're trading it for a hand trap. But what happens if they don't have a hand trap? Because a lot of go second cards right now, so people may choose not to side in more hand traps and just choose to break boards. And so Call By doesn't do anything like that. People aren't forced to play hand traps. And the other reason is I don't actually think they hit many of the engines that effectively. I think there's a lot of decks that can avoid Call By right now or not have as big an impact with it, as opposed to previous formats where like everything was triggering in the grave. So I just decided to remove that. And I mean, I kind of already just alluding to what I was saying earlier with the playing the Dogma engines because you're losing to the same stuff is like I've already built the deck where that I'm not going to lose to Droll as hard. There's a lot less search cards in the deck. If I'm normal selling Alistair, searching Invocation, they drop Droll. It's like, okay, maybe I won't be able to use, my Prosperity in hand, but then it's just a discard for Mechabo. Maybe I won't be able to Light Stage, but there's a lot less search cards, and you get punished by those cards a lot less now.
True. Okay, so what exactly did these Performage, Trick Clown, and Trickstar Corobane do for you in the strategy? I haven't seen these cards really used, and of course you've got the Trickstar Light Stage as well to go with that package. What exactly do these cards do for you in this strategy, in this deck? What do they contribute?
Like I said earlier, is that the idea was that rather than trying to high roll with opening 3 engines with the Destiny invoked Dogma version, where you're opening all 3 engines with power cards, I just wanted to open 2 engines more consistently. And so what those cards did is they allowed me to, they're extenders. So if you open them in Alistair, you're now making Verte and a Mechaba and getting the Destiny engine through the Verte. But they are also cards that I can play low amounts of them while still playing cards that let me get to them, but also have multiple purposes. And so what I mean by that is I'm playing, 1 Corobane and 1 Light Stage. So that's 2 cards in my deck. However, I'm now including Terraforming and Set Rotation. And so now I'm playing these cards that have multi-purposes. And so it allows me to just better adapt to the scenario. So if I'm opening Set Rotation and I don't have Alistair, well, now I don't need to go for the Corobane. I can just search the Alistair and have the Alistair engine going. However, if I open Alistair already, then I have the ability to turn Set Rotation into an extender to get to Verte. It's the same thing with Performage, where I play the Foolish Burial Girds, I can Foolish the Trick Clown, send, get the special out, or if I open Invocation and not Alistair, then I can get to the Alistair engine that way. And so these are just extenders that I think are the best, not only because they're lights, but because the cards that allow you to get to them are multi-purpose. I think that when you have cards that are multi-purpose and can be used in multiple cases, you're just they're gonna be better than if they're just linear cards.
Yeah, exactly. They give you a chance to adapt to different scenarios, different situations. I mean, current format is very broad. Like, you have things like, what is the bird deck? You have things like Shaddolls. You have things like, then you can get left field stuff too, like stuff that's like kind of wacky, but like, like Dragon Link, whatever, stuff that's not as common right now. But having stuff that lets you adapt to every situation differently, I think that's really good. And turning, like you said, your Set Rotation, your Terraforming into modal spells is really, really good. What was the thought process behind triple Super Poly? I mean, this is something that you don't see in the Invoke Dogmatica deck. Was this kind of in preparation of just seeing the Invoke Dogmatica mirror match a lot?
It just answers every board really well. So if you look at the top meta decks, which I think are Sword Soul, Bird Up, and Destiny Invoke Dogmatica, which I think most people would agree with. Super Poly just puts in an insane amount of work for all of them. So if you open Alistair, okay, assuming you're opening Alistair, because if you're not, then okay, you kind of brick. That's unfortunate. But you own Alistair against the Bird Up board. You can make, if you have Meltdown with it, you can make Rage In. You're removing a negate through the Super Poly. You're also booking something else. You can negate like that. Against Sword Soul, it's very efficient. A lot of times they'll have a Veil or Imperm for the Alistair. If not, they're using their Synchro to negate. You chain the Super Poly, you're dodging that effect, and then you're using their Fleur. So you're dodging whatever, effect Veil or like negation they're using on the Alistair, as well as eating up the Fleur. And then Raging comes out. If you have Meltdown up, you also get the book out of it. And then, the card's insane in the mirror, or not mirror, but the Dogma version of the deck, because once again, you just are able to clear and force without destroying it. And so I just think that Super Poly, for a change, actually interacted well with a lot of the decks in the format, just due to how they set up their boards. I mean, it's kind of the abundance of wind monsters or fusion monsters on the board that made this card really strong. And also the effect Failure and Imperm running rampant, which allows you to kind of cheat it away and dodge it. Also in the last round, I dodged a Widowacre from a Striker player by Super Polying it away, and so I got the search for the invocation still. And also going first, it's still fine because we play Elysium in the extra deck, which is a not a popular card, but it's it's not something someone expects. And in worst case scenario, it's kind of like a break the glass where you just summon this, clear the board, and then you're in a scenario where you're grinding. And, next turn, hopefully you have the Destiny guys in the grave, you're drawing 2, you have Alistair Engine going again, and you can just completely reset your board again.
Yeah, no, I think super polymerization is a really fucking amazing inclusion into this deck. It's something that I want to see more of moving forward from other players playing Invoke decks. Even the Dogmatica deck could probably play this. A reason I really, really like this card now, too, is because a lot of people are playing these Dimensional Barrier, Artifact Scythe, these types of cards, and Super Polymerization allows you to still execute your strategy while being Scythe locked or while getting hit by Dimensional Barrier on your turn or whatever. It doesn't mean you're completely shut off from making a play with your Alistair the Invoker. So I think this is a really good meta call, a really good choice. And it's interesting you were talking about how it's used to dodge Valor and dodge Imperm and stuff. Heads up decision for sure. TC Boo, was that like the best floodgate for you the weekend? Like, did you think that was what you wanted, or how did that card perform for you?
So I was testing that card in Striker, and I will never understand how any Striker plays that card. It's like I make Hayate, I swing, and then it's like I either have to crash into a monster or it just sits there. So like I don't like playing floodgates that actually hurt your deck. There's not really anything that this deck conflicts other than, which I learned around 10, because I always think Raging is Thunder instead of Warrior. You can't have Raging and DP. But other than that, there's literally no confliction in the deck. You can make Raging, Mechaba, and then the Guinos all in once. I only saw it twice this entire event. Once was I sent it off droplets against the bird up board, so he couldn't oaf my droplets, and then I full cleared the board with Purgatrio. And then round 10, I flipped it both games versus Sky Striker, and he couldn't play. So, I mean, this card's insane. The fact that I didn't drop much is, I mean, I guess somewhat unfortunate. I consider siding out in game 2 and 3 if I think they're going to side in back or removal and put the D barriers, just because if they are using any kind of lightning storm like effect, then flipping D barrier just stops the turn while the only V1 gets hit. But I mean, it's one of the best floodgates in the game. Most of the boards you can break going first, and so you don't need your entire hand to break a board. I can break the board 3-4 cards, set up a weak board, and then just flipping that on when they're trying to recreate a board was really good in theory. Although, like I said, it only came up 2 matches, but they I guess put in the work those 2 matches.
Yeah, and this card can even break boards on its own if you're able to bait any sort of negates or shut things off with like Droplet and then just flip one of these. It can force your opponent down to 1 monster if they're on something like Dragon Link or Bird Up or something that has a lot of the same type in play. Obviously, those are the 2 that come to mind. It's a powerful floodgate in that it locks people out but also still affects the board, similar to Rivalry of Warlords in Edison format. The last card I want to ask you about before we get into more like the tournament discussion is the Fantastical Dragon Phantasme Thanos. I haven't seen this card played much recently at all. What exactly is this here for?
In theory, this should be good versus Sky versus the Invoke decks, because they're always making all Mirage into Security Guard. So you're fixing your hand, digging for stuff like Super Poly, and then any Rogue decks. This card wasn't the best this event. It was okay. I saw it. I think I saw it once or twice. The main thing is that to be honest, I felt the entire side deck was somewhat lackluster the entire event just because I had so much main deck hate. But the idea is that also one of the reasons I wanted to play this over Sky was that, there's a fair bit of garnets in these decks, especially when you're playing the Destiny engine, and just being able to reset your hand is insane. And I think that we had this card in TOS format when it came out and was really big back then, but you didn't really have it was really good in that format, but then as the formats move on, people kind of moved away from it, but forgot how good this card was. In the metas where this card's good, it's insane, especially when you're playing decks with garnets. And so I just wanted to have that mentality to try and, fix my hand. I have enough main deck outs with dealing with boards. I don't need to actually have all these side cards that deal with boards. And so I had the luxury of playing this on the side. And again, it wasn't the best card, but that's kind of the theory behind it, where I just have the luxury with how the main deck's built to play a card like this to just unbrick hands.
Interesting stuff. As far as the tournament goes, James, do you have anything you wanted to ask him about the tournament itself?
Oh yeah, I have a lot of questions. I don't know what any of these cards do, but I've got a lot of questions. First of all, what were your matchups, and what were some particularly difficult or memorable ones? And within that, I would just like to hear more about the remote duel experience as a whole. I mean, you said yourself you were a little skeptical, and I am skeptical. So I would just like to hear how it went and what your interaction with these players was like in addition to these matchups.
Round 1, I played Grand Maju. I 2-0'd it. Round 2, I played Ignosur. I 2-0'd it. Round 3, I played Bird Up. I 2-0'd it, and I lost that die roll. So the first game, he full comboed me. I broke the board with droplets into Purgatrio. And then game 2, I had Droll, so he set up a weak board and was able to push through it and make Raging DPE, so he couldn't have follow, or he couldn't play through that follow up. Round 4, I played against Sword Soul. I lost to Andy Spell game 3. He protosed me, as well as ended with, I think it was just the Synchro and some back row. But I could have cleared through the Protos, which is another reason I don't like this deck, is because against Sword Soul, when they Protos you can just end with a lot of times with double Rage in, and that's enough of negates to stop them from pushing next turn. But I lost to any spell, which happens. Round 5, I played Eldritch Invoked Red Eyes. I won that 2-0. Round 6, I trolled really hard. This was after supper. I was groggy. I lost 0-2 to Destiny Dogma Invoked. I think that was the worst round I played the event. I think I played pretty well overall this event, other than that round. Round 7, I played against Noble Knight or Inferno Nobles, 2-0'd it. Round 8, I played against Sword Soul, won 2-1. I won the die roll game 1, set my board. Actually, I saw TC Boot game 1. That was a quick one. Game 2, he didn't fleur me when I had Super Poly, which is annoying because then I couldn't Super Poly the fleur away to clear his board. So that was annoying. And then game 3, we got into this grind game where I had to make Elysium and sit on it for a bit. And then so that was day 1. So I finished X2 after day 1. And then day 2, I played against Sword Soul I played against Destiny Invoked Dogmatica round 1. I won 2-0. That was a very strange match because we each answered each other's Alistairs like 4 times. Like, it wasn't until like the 5th summon of Alistair that's effect actually resolved. And then around 10, I played against Sky Striker and 2-0'd it. TC Boo's a good card. And then in top 32, because they played out top 32, but not any further of the top cut, I played against not Grandmaju. I played against Numeron. Gaia's known for that, and I got blown out a bit. I don't think I played as good as I could have, but at that point, I was kind of content with my placing, and I don't think my misplaced or anything super obvious, but in hindsight, maybe I could have done something differently. But I also, too, with that, and the tourney ended there. As for the remote duel setup, it's not the same as real life, obviously, but I think it's a similar setup. Most people are, friendly enough there. You can get some chats in between games. Would I do it again? Probably. Although that being said, I'm definitely looking forward to events in real life. I think that if someone's going to be a problem over remote duels, then they're going to be a problem in real life. I think you always have those players. So I don't think that the setup really increases that at all. Nor do I think particularly that I didn't have any cheating issues, although I am fairly, I think, direct with what I expect, where people want people's hands to be and how to cut. So I didn't have any problems with that. And I'll probably do some of these going forward, but I'm not, it's a solution to what we have in the world right now, I guess.
I thank you for answering my questions. I'm just so, I 2 things. So one, I would like you, and maybe Keegan as well, can you just talk to me a little bit about the Fusion Destiny DPE package? Because look, these are some cards that I do know what they do. I have looked into some current stuff. I've just seen, more and more decks splashing this package. Obviously that's like the trend now. That's the new card that's been released. It grants like a sort of finisher, interrupt, and vast increase in power level to like a shitload of old archetypes as well. What are your thoughts on that? First of all, is that healthy? Like, you're adding a win con more or less to a lot of decks that didn't have it, because as I understand from my POV, like Striker was a little like wishy-washy, and then people have been playing the DPE Striker deck, which has like allowed it to really have a lot of longevity. But these are also, you can brick on multiple copies of Fusion Destiny too, right? Like, am I wrong?
Yeah, you can, and you can draw the pieces, which is horrible as well, especially
Right.
in some decks where you really need every card to do something.
To me, this is like epitome of modern Yu-Gi-Oh, where you're like, I understand you can search it, and I understand like its sort of positioning, but like you're playing a bunch of cards to do a really powerful effect, but it's also sort of coming with some downsides, but you're trying to like math your deck out such that you're just like hoping those don't, you're just trying to mitigate that. And maybe you're always doing that in every format to some extent.
Here's the thing with the Fusion deck.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Destiny package. Yeah, I'm basically gonna tell you wrong, basically. So once you draw the first Fusion Destiny, it automatically converts all the other shit. The only card that's like really shitty to draw is obviously Dasher. Dasher sucks to draw. But even drawing, or Dasher and Celestial, I should say. But even drawing them is not so bad, because the Celestial, once it vanishes from grave, it'll draw you 2 new cards. So in a sense, it replaces itself even if you brick on it. The first copy of Fusion Destiny, provided it resolves, it'll turn into your Phoenix Enforcer, right? And then the second copies of Fusion Destiny, you can set them and then use them as cards you can blow up with your Phoenix Enforcer to blow up other cards. it's kind of like Scrap Dragon in a sense. It's like a one card Scrap Dragon. I don't know if you've played formats with that, James. But basically, your
But you're
first
usually using the DP on itself though, right? Like to pop itself
just the
to.
You
first
don't have
turn.
to.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Okay.
Just the first turn, you usually use it on itself because it dies from Fusion Destiny. But basically, they're not like true bricks even afterward
Okay.
because you can convert them. Like basically, they turn into like Regeki breaks.
Confirm, deny?
I mean, it's true for the most part. I mean, I'm not worried about drawing. Like, if the first Fusion Destiny resolves, like, I'm getting this enforced so that they have to deal with, and then I'm drawing 2 cards. It's like, okay, if one of those cards is another Fusion Destiny, it's like, I've now drawn 1 card and, like, it's somewhat blank, but, like, there's so much discard fodder in this deck anyways. Like, the blank's still fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right,
Right.
right, right.
Super polymerization,
Droplets. Yeah.
droplets. Yeah.
Mechaba,
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 of course. Yes.
the Invoker Link, like,
Yes. Yes. The Invoker
I, th-
Link, of course.
I think that the card's not so powerful that the format's kind of based around it, but it's not entirely based around it. It's not like you have to play a deck with DP. Like the Swordsoul versions that are doing better are without DP. Bird Up naturally play it, and then like you have your next best deck. So Dogmatica plays it, Sky Striker plays it. You have some Eldritch versions that play it. Can or can't. It's up to them. So like it's a card that elevates some of the decks up there. I mean, I think that the card's fine. It's just not something you'd want to have forever. I think it's gonna be fun to play with for 8 months, a year, and then after that, I probably like to see it go because I don't need an engine like this lasting forever where you're just slamming down a body for free. But I think that it's fun to at least have the interactions to play with for a bit because it's not so overpowered that it makes me think what the heck is this?
Yeah. I personally haven't played like probably as much as you have Soulsmanic. I haven't played in a YCS yet, but as far as from my experience with the card is, I love cards like Scrap Dragon. I love cards like DPE because they really reward you for when you use your cards, how you use them, like how you convert certain cards in certain situations. There's a lot of decision trees, and it really rewards you for playing well. So I'm a big fan of cards like this, and I don't think it's like, while it is the quote unquote the best thing you can be doing in some decks right now, I I'm not on the camp where like it needs to be banned. Like I don't think it's a problem card or anything. It's just a great card that's a lot of fun.
I think it needs to be gone at some point. Like I wouldn't want to play like with this card still in 3 years. If it's still as good as it is. Just because I think it will get stale being in so many decks. But yeah, I think the other thing is like one of the stronger effects of it is that you get a draw 2 next turn. So you're already kind of pushing towards a grind game as opposed to just, I'm setting up this massive board and my opponent can't play. You're already kind of getting that position where it's you're grinding back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, and those types of games are usually more fun than just like a I have 40 negates. Do you have Dark Ruler? Or like I spent my whole hand, but it's all on the board, and like, what are you gonna do? It's kind of more this like back and forth, like, okay, you answered the Phoenix Enforcer, but next turn I get this +2, and then you have to deal with those cards, and it gives you a little bit more turns to play the game, which I think is a little bit better than like the previous meta, which was like mostly Drytron, and like a lot of games ended on the first turn. I mean, it still happens, but it's a little bit
Yeah,
different now.
I think it happens a lot less. Like I think it's more of a turn 3, turn 4 meta. And like, okay, people may say like, okay, are 4-turn games good? But like, if you're having 4 turns of heavy interaction, then yeah, I think they're good. Like your opponent sets up a board with, 2, 3 negates. I'm playing through it, setting up my own board. He's playing through it, setting up his board to some extent, and maybe I get gamed, or maybe it's a weak board now and I can game him. So, I think it's fine when you have these short games if there's a lot of interaction in those turns.
Facts, facts.
So the question that everyone's asking, how does Edison fit in all this? Now that you're current Yu-Gi-Oh pro, we sticking with the Edison? Are you gonna carry the torch, or you're gonna give it up to just play current?
I mean, I've always just done both. I just play whatever I feel like at any given point in time. So I mean, I was grinding value a bit in Edison, and then probably if there's another deck that catches my interest, I'll probably switch to that and grind a bit more. The one thing I think I should point out though is that the Vayu deck kind of gave me a little bit of inspiration just because I was adding Jane and Aaron into it, which I think are not as standard decks, and it was just they felt really rewarding playing one copy of those cards by having 3 of them through Reinforcements of the Army and Charge of the Light Brigade. And so I think that this deck did a similar thing in the form of set rotation and terraforming. And so I think that the kind of principle of having cards that have multiple purposes, you know, is a good thing. Is definitely spans over formats.
For sure.
Yes.
That's a good insight, for sure. The only other thing I would ask you, one thing that I almost feel intimidated by sometimes is like I feel like current players really run the gauntlet and grind out, every different matchup. It sounds like you just really know your stuff about different interactions and niche scenarios that you could find yourself in. I'm also curious about sort of like calcing and math that goes on, because it's my understanding that in these sort of like smaller test groups, figuring out ratios of starters, figuring out ratios of, and like you're saying, like really plotting out like here's how often I want to be doing this turn two versus turn three, like that just seems compared to me who stopped really playing in 2011 or something, that was never something that I feel like was developed quite as deeply. And I'm just curious about how much you sort of participate in that or use that to your advantage, and what your mindset is with stuff like that and tools you might use.
Well, I study math, so that, that definitely interests me to some degree.
Right.
But I think it's somewhat of a trap to go too far down the rabbit hole with that. Because like you can calculate how often you're going to draw a card, but there's not really a better number than the other. It's like, okay, if I play 9 copies and I can draw it 26% of the time or whatever, compared to drawing it 30%, or I don't draw it 26% of the time, and if I play 8 copies then I don't draw it 30% of the time. It's like, okay, we've calculated these numbers, but like they don't actually tell us what's better. You just kind of People kind of just look at them and go, well, 30 is nicer or 25 is nicer, and they have this like interior mental number that they want to hit. So I think it's somewhat actually a trap to overcalculate. I mean, I think it's good to calculate to some degree. I think the main thing, I think one of the big things for calculating is looking when you're going second, what the extra card does, and so how many starters can you take out of your deck to not lose consistency. So if I'm going second, I may take out maybe a set rotation in mine, and okay, now I've won the starter, but I have the extra card, so it kind of balances it out. But I don't think it definitely is somewhat of a trap and just kind of a show off more so than actually productive thinking to spend too much time on doing stuff like that. Because at some point you just need to go with, this is my ratios. Okay, this is the number behind it, but I have to choose some number to stick with and go with that.
Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. I agree with that.
Very much.
Yeah, I agree with that. You can definitely overcalculate a deck. And honestly, how do you know if opening an opener 30% of the time or 26% of the time is what you want? It's really hard to decipher the differences, especially when you're getting to stuff like 3-4% differentials in a game with as much variance as this and as much different matchups as this. Congratulations on your performance, Soulsmanic. Thanks for doing this
Thank you,
interview.
Dave.
This was
Thanks for having me.
a lot of fun. Hope to have you on the channel more in the future, maybe for some Edison stuff, maybe for some current stuff. I've been grinding a little bit. Maybe we'll do you can coach me on this deck or something in the future. That'd be a lot of fun. And
Yeah, sounds good.
basically signing off. Like, comment, subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. James, any final words for the people? Soulsmanic, anything you want to plug? A Twitter, social media, something?
Nope, nope. We're just like this.
All right.
Nice job. Yeah, thank you for joining on the channel, and I'm glad we can have such a, high quality players in every format represented in Edison.
Of course.
Cash money. Peace out, everyone.